Good morning, patrons. It's getting easier for me to do these videos because I can actually imagine you, the people who I'm connecting with online, and I can imagine you there painting. So hi Leary and Rinska, welcome, and hello to Brad, and thank you again for being with us. Rebecca and Peter and Ariel, thank you so much for joining, and Janice, thank you for being with us. So now I want to show you the veil painting that's going on here, and I am ready to start to begin to bring in a theme. And this is when I like to use a piece of white chalk. This is just your standard white chalk, nothing too fancy. And I sometimes will look at my picture and try to imagine what I see there, and then I might sketch it on a little bit with the white chalk. So this is the original way that I've been creating this painting, and I could imagine different things here, perhaps a bird up here and a figure sitting here. But sometimes it's really helpful if we turn the picture and look at it different ways. So I already did this while you were away, and here we have the way that I think I'm going to paint on it. And why is because I see a really great hummingbird form somewhere in this area. And I'm just going to sort of chalk on. The great thing about chalk is that it will just disappear when I put water on the picture. But you could see that somewhere in here is going to be this great little hummingbird head, and we could have a body, and I think the wings can be going off the picture, and also they'll be sweeping down here, something like this. Now I like to loosely sketch it on because later it's going to change quite a bit when I lay on color. But let's start doing that with some color right away. So here we've got some plates that I'm going to reconstitute the color with, and just put a little water in there and let my yellow dribble into the center here. I like to start with yellow because it's much softer, easier to get started with without being too harsh to the picture. And I'll start by adding some yellow in places where I feel like yellow could be brightened. And you can see that I'm doing smaller veils now. And I don't really want this hummingbird to be entirely green either. So I'm going to come and start mixing in my blue. And I'll take a small amount of blue. And this way I can sort of coax the figure forward. Once you start painting a thing in your veil paintings, it's easy to get hooked in and just want to do that entirely. But we have a whole other section here that's just begging for us. And what would be a good theme with a hummingbird? Of course, flowers. And this hummingbird seems so happy and thrilled that there's so much orangey flowers back here. And you know, I don't really know what kind of flower this is, but I have seen these giant orange lilies. And so I could imagine that this could be one of those day lilies back here. There'll probably be another leaf going back here. And I'm going to have to work this day lily out because it isn't complete yet by any means. But if I have one orange section, I might like to have another down here. And then I'm going to look over here and I see some red. So I'm going to paint a little bit of red there because I've already got red on my brush. So I like to move around the picture and accentuate everywhere that I think red wants to be beckoning forth. And now it's wet. So I'm going to take a hairdryer quickly and dry it. Okay, so it would be very tempting for me at this point, especially since I know that everybody's watching me, to look at a picture of a hummingbird flying upwards. It might even help me to get an idea of how I want the head to be. I don't want it just to be flat. And I could also look at a daylily, but it's a little bit early in the process to do that. So what I'd rather do is just show you how I can go on creating small veils that will form the picture out of the color instead of out of my concepts. Now, that's a little bit difficult to understand because conceptually I'm working with the idea of hummingbird. And I know that a hummingbird has a tail, so obviously I'm going to do some little striky things here. I know that the hummingbird has wings, so I don't really know how this is going to be. But I'm going to try to be free about my application so that later I can say, oh, I don't really like the fact that this is sticking out. I may just want to paint it shorter. Or over here I might say, I really love this sweep. So let's darken that whole space with a little more blue. And I'll bring this right in. And I don't know exactly how it's going to go up there, but we can begin to see contrast between the hummingbird itself and the background. It also helps if you bring in different colors. So here, let's take a little bit of ruby color for the chest area and lightly we'll apply it in a way that doesn't define the hummingbird completely, but we'll put it on and then I'll soften it by taking my brush, drying it on the rag, and embedding that color just a little bit into the form. I'm also seeing really pretty purples up here. And this should be dry before you paint on it, otherwise you won't get a veil. So over here we see some really good dry areas. Let's take a little bit more red and show a veil. I think I like the way this is bulbing out, going behind. It's going to go right back behind there. I also like this one. And even though I don't really know how it ends, it doesn't matter because I can dry it off, and as the color emerges slowly, it will show more and more. Here's a great veil right over the yellows. And here we have some beautiful reds down here. And everything at this time is quite flat on the picture. In other words, I don't have any values of color that are darker than the others. Everything is sort of at the same level here. There isn't something really, really light except for these white spaces, and there isn't something really, really dark. One thing I'd like to tell you is that some people say when you veil paint, you should stand, and that way you are really present in yourself in a different way. You could say that you are fully present in yourself when you're standing on your feet, because you have to hold your balance and you're exposing your entire chest and digestive system to the color, which is very beautiful. But I'm going to tell you for a fact in my experience that you can sit down when you paint. And those of you who might be challenged physically, some of you may even not have the ability to stand, It's perfectly fine to sit and you will get all the benefits. So now I'm just going to paint, and you can watch, and I'll try not to have too much narrative so that you can just experience the beautiful flow of color and how it begins to emerge. Drying and pulling off with a dry brush. Wipe and swipe. Wipe, swipe. Now see this light area here? I love that light area, and I see it's kind of shaped by the darkness here, and it happens to be right around the head of the hummingbird. That's really advantageous. I highly suggest you leave any light areas. And if you find any drips, you can just go through with a wet towel and dab them slightly, or you can take your brush, dry it off, and wick up any drips that you don't like. Be sure to let your veil painting dry in between. If you don't have a hair dryer, don't set it near a heater or anything like that, because you might pop the tape off, but you can just come back to it in a few minutes. So remember, I told you, don't look at pictures right away to get your forms. And the reason for that is because you might preconceive how it's supposed to look. It's better to look at the form and say, oh, this daylily looks like it's folding down that way, and now I need to look at a picture of a daylily and really see how it looks. So here's some daylilies, and I kind of like this one because it shows that it has this bulbous part underneath. It also shows that I might make the petals themselves flap out instead of just being a flat surface. But you can see that it so happens that this movement and this movement are very similar. And this one kind of folds forward like that. So if I take my chalk here and I just cut across here a little bit, I see that I'm creating a space for another petal to come down and disappear behind the wings of my hummingbird. And here in this part, this could come across because it already does. And under here, I would have room for that bulbous sort of cup. And there might even be a stem that comes down below. And these are little things that you might look at and you might say, oh, okay, there's going to be bright yellows in here. These things. I could do the same thing for a hummingbird too. I could look up a picture of a hummingbird flying upwards and remake conscious for myself how are hummingbirds' eyes actually, or how is it that their chests would be glowing with light if they're facing upwards instead of going out.